So today we're going to take a look at The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki. And in a vacuum, I think this book would have scored a lot better. But one of the reasons I scored it low is because a lot of the information is covered in another book that I've reviewed, which is Think Again by Adam Grant, which I think is overall better. And so I gave The Wisdom of Crowds lower scores than perhaps it deserves, just because I'm apt, unless you're looking for something very, very niche, or you've already read Think Again and you want something that's kind of similar, I think that I would just recommend that over The Wisdom of Crowds, generally speaking, as well as, The Wisdom of Crowds was written about 20 years ago, and Adam Grant's book was written a couple years ago. So there's that, and if you just kind of want to, swap to looking at Adam Grant's book, you could do that instead. But let's jump into this. I'm not going to go for his last name. What James discovers, or what he explores, is the topic of, how groups of people together tend to outperform, or can outperform, let's say, experts in any given field, and can do so quite consistently in certain types of things, specifically when all of their guesses can be aggregated, or all their knowledge can be aggregated when they have good information, just like the experts might, and also when they are thinking independently. And it's important that they are thinking independently. And so what he talks about is, if you take a classroom and they're supposed to guess how many jelly beans are in a jar, the class average will tend to be extraordinarily close to the number of jelly beans. Same for, guessing how much a cow weighs, these types of things. And the idea is that on the whole, or on average, what will happen is all of the answers, or all of the mistakes, will tend to cancel each other out, because you'll make mistakes in both directions as long as they're thinking independently. And instead what you will get is the sum of all their collective knowledge. This is kind of the argument he makes. He talks about this in the afterword, how this sort of oversimplification sounds like a bit of mysticism, which it does. And rightly so. But he also talks about how it's important that they're thinking independently. He talks about how the Bay of Pigs, for example, is... actually, I don't remember his Bay of Pigs talk as much. I know he mentions it in the book, because it's one of the earlier chapters. But one of the things is, if the thinkers are not thinking independently anymore, that's when you can have errors break down. And so a good example of this is towards the end of the book. He talks about how bubbles in terms of markets happen, and they happen because of feedback, and the people aren't making guesses independently anymore, and instead they are making guesses based on what they think the market will do. And so you're making guesses in a way that is no longer independent from the other person's guesses, but instead is contingent. And so this will tend to, get worse results. But he makes a general advocacy for, thinking collectively, and generally arguing against things like. This book was written in the early 2000s, so he kind of writes in a way that is picking apart the very CEO-centric culture of businesses in the 90s, and how it's really not the one central CEO that is can make an awesome decision, but instead, it would be much better if you left that to the collective. And so one way you could do this, and this practical solution I don't think is offered in James's book, but is offered in Grant's book, Adam Grant, Think Again, just to repeat it, is that, for example, if you're going to start a meeting and you want to get everyone's collective input, in order to make the thinking more independent, you can have people write down their perspectives on the matter ahead of time, because and James talks about this in this book, is if there is one speaker for a given topic, they will tend to skew people towards that topic. And so let's say it's pro-choice, pro-life. Whoever speaks first, the people who are swayable, which obviously not everyone's going to be swayable, will tend to be swayed towards, whoever speaks first, and this will bias the crowd in a way that interferes with collective thinking. Just real quick, I'm going to go through the names of some of these chapters. The difference difference makes waggle dances, the Bay of Pigs, and the value of diversity. So I remember there being Bay of Pigs, but I don't remember exactly what he wrote. Monkey see, monkey do, information, imitation, information cascades, and independence. Again, independence is an important characteristic so you don't just get a reinforcing cyclical effect. Putting the pieces together, the CIA, Linux, and the art of decentralization. So he talks about how there are the market, just in general, is incredibly good at organizing people for making just an infinite supply of goods. There's this essay called iPencil I've read recently. Let's see, where is it? iPencil, written by Leonard Reed, which also kind of talks about this. And in iPencil, he talks about how the production of a pencil, requires over 1 million people. And you're like, that doesn't sound right. Just a simple lead wooden pencil. But, you have the people who chop down the trees, the people who made the tools for the people to chop down the trees, the people who harvested the ore to make the tools to chop down the trees. And this is just chopping down the trees. It's not in transporting the trees. It's not, building the railroads that transport the trees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you analyze all these complex relationships, you'll see that it's just this vast infinite network, and all of this is organized because it's decentralized. And so this knowledge is local type of attitude James talks about in the book. Okay, shall we dance? Coordination in a complex world. This is exactly what I'm referring to. Society does exist. Taxes, tipping, television, and trust. And so this is about how we coordinate in a society, especially when there's a free rider problem. If it's beneficial for everyone to pay their taxes, but if you don't pay your taxes, you get the benefits of other people paying their taxes because you still have the military defending you and such. And so there's a free rider problem, and people in general, he talks about how they, as long as they think everyone's paying their taxes, they're more likely to pay their taxes, but if they think everyone's cheating, they're more likely to cheat, this type of thing. Traffic, what we have is a failure to coordinate. And so he's talking about coordinating people. He talks about how people, walking down a busy street, there's a study that was done that shows heuristics that aren't even conscious in regards to how people coordinate the foot traffic and this type of stuff. Science, collaboration, competition, and reputation. He talks about science as a whole, or the whole entire genre. How the way science is incentivized is such that they spread the information widely. Because what you get from science as a researcher is you get a claim when you make a very big publish. And what this does is it allows, because the incentive is to publish and spread information, it allows kind of this idea of meritocracy, and the ideas come out, whereas a corporation might be inclined to have corporate secret type of thing in terms of the information. Science does not. Science is incentivized in a healthier way that leads to the proliferation of information, and this is good. In 9 committees, juries, and teams, the Columbia disaster, and how small groups could be made to work. In the Columbia disaster, he talks about how the research team, had a bunch of people that were supposed to prevent disaster, let's say, but the problem was just one person on the head, and at the head of the group, and they made all the decisions, and it wasn't a collective decision making thing, which underutilized all the people available. The company meet the new boss, same as the old boss. He talks largely about corporations and these sorts of things and incentives, and how there's one part in it, or there's one study he references that was pretty alarming, which is that the people who tend to get promoted are the ones who just deliver good news only and brush bad news under the rug, which I found a tremendously interesting thing. We have markets, beauty contests, bowling alley, and stock prices. He talks about bubbles a lot in this, which we'd already talked about. And then kind of outro is democracy, dreams of the common good, which is a short little thing, and then he has the afterword. And okay, so there's one other idea that was in here. I thought about pulling up the exact quote, but I decided against it. And this is, I found it very fascinating, which is that when people, he talks about polarization and how polarization works exactly. And a lot of people use the word polarization, and then, but the concept itself is not discussed that much. And what he talks about is how if you put yourself if you look at yourself relative, I'm just going to use left and right, liberal, conservative in the United States as an example. I'm not meaning to talk about politics, but I'm just going to, it's an example that I think a lot of people can latch onto. If you view yourself as right of center, you view yourself as like right of the average, let's say. If you then enter a group where you are just where you are all with all conservatives, what you will end up doing is, because you have conceived of yourself as in your head as being right of average, you will tend to actually become right of average in the new group you see yourself, this is how polarization tends to happen, because it's not just that how you conceive of yourself in terms of like where you are, you're going to actually trend towards that, no matter if the group itself changes. And so if your group changes to reflect all like conservative attitudes, you'll move even further right as you try and be like right of the average, which the new average is big, all the conservatives. One moment, I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to pause the video and then I'll be right back. All right, I'm just going to read the passage where he talks about this. Why does polarization occur? One reason is because people's reliance on social comparison. This means more than that people are constantly comparing themselves to everyone else, which of course they are. It means that people are constantly comparing themselves to everyone else with an eye towards maintaining their relative position within the group. In other words, if you start out in the middle of the group and you believe the group has moved, as it were, to the right, you're inclined to shift your position to the right as well, so that relative to everyone else, you're standing still. Of course, by moving to the right, you're moving the group to the right, making social comparison something of a self-fulfilling prophecy. What's assumed to be real eventually becomes real. This is also notably kind of similar to the Red Queen hypothesis. Red Queen hypothesis is an evolutionary biology hypothesis, or like kind of idea or something that they notice, which is that, salamanders, let's say, will evolve increasingly high-level toxins to make it so that any animal that eats them will become poisoned and die, and then whichever, or it might be newts, I can't remember which one it is, and then whichever animal eats them will get increasingly strong stomachs or antitoxins such that they are able to eat them, and it's a never-ending battle where you just both are, it's an arms race that goes nowhere, and it's called the Red Queen hypothesis because it refers to the movie Alice in Wonderland, or the book, where Alice is running as fast as she can just to stand in the same spot when the guards are chasing her. And this is the same with evolution. You run as fast as you can, evolving an increasing arms race to the point where, like, if you lick, like, a newt or a salamander or whatever it is, like, it could kill you as a person, but then there are animals that just, like, eat them no problem, which is fascinating, but that's, like, a different thing. The idea is, it reminded me of that, conceptually, the idea. Anyways, let's get into the ratings, which, the ratings for all of this, I would like to just preface by saying, on almost all of these, the book probably deserved a little bit higher ratings, maybe not on style or something like this. I thought it was pretty medium. But the reason why it scores poorly in my mind is just because of comparison to Adam Grant's Think Again, which I just think is better and more timely. This book was written 20 years ago. Adam Grant's book was written like 1 or 2 years ago, or like 1 to 3. And so I also just a fan of Adam Grant. So it's hard for me to give this book good scores, because I think, for example, on utility, I think it's very useful to know, perhaps, how you can use collective decision making to be better. But like, I would just read Grant's book for this. Let's just go through it. Okay, utility, I give it a 5, pretty medium. The ideas are useful, but the author doesn't offer any sort of ideas for implementation, and it's more theoretical. It's not like theoretical in terms of like difficult to discern or difficult to unpack, but he only talks about the ideas, and it would be up for you to work out a practical implementation, although certainly there could be a practical implementation for these ideas, but you read it, yeah. Okay, for novelty, I gave it a 6. At the time of the writing of the book, my understanding is these ideas were relatively novel, and this was like a pretty big deal. But now you can access the ideas elsewhere. Obviously, I'm referencing Adam Grant's book, but even more than just Adam Grant's book, you know, these ideas are now, they've permeated somewhat into like the aether, and so you can access them if you want. They're in a bunch of different places. And so while I think it's important to recognize how you know, just the hero expert or just venerating the experts above collective thinking might be a mistake, I think you can find it in a few places. So this is why it scores a 6 on novelty, because I think it's important in terms of idea, but kind of easy to find. For entertainment, I gave it a 5. The writing's okay. Same with the style. No complaints. Nothing stood out as being spectacular. In terms of prose, he presented the information. He did it in a readable way. The sentences are clear. They're not flashy. They're just, it's okay. Readability, gave it a 5.5. I think he does a pretty good job making the ideas pretty clear, using analogies, examples, etc. And okay, I don't think the ideas are very hard to understand, though, so it's hard to score super high on readability because it's... you know, the information's simple, the presentation's simple. It's a nice little book. For interest, I gave it a 6.5. I actually find this stuff pretty interesting. This is perhaps the one I might have shortchanged him the most. Had I not read Adam Grant's book relatively recently, I probably would have found a lot of this stuff a lot more interesting, or had I not encountered it before, because some of it I've encountered before Adam Grant's book. So overall score of 5.5. As far as recommendations go, I don't think I would recommend this book to anyone. And it's not because this book is bad. This book is fine. Pretty medium. I guess the one group I would recommend this to is for someone who wanted a more, let's say, corporate or market-centric display of cooperative thinking, maybe. Or for someone who had read Adam Grant's book and maybe wanted to read some more. Maybe. I don't know. And maybe I just liked I liked Adam Grant books so much, and so like looking back, I'm looking through like rose tinted lenses. But I think that for the most part, I would recommend Adam Grant's Think Again over this. But I do think that either one of these books would be worth reading. I think if you had this book and you didn't have Adam Grant's book, I would say give it a read, something like this. You could probably find this book for cheaper than Adam Grant's book. I guess if you're on a budget and you want to read about collective thinking, this could be a reason for me to recommend this book. But, I don't think I would widely recommend this book. I'll probably... there's like one or two things in there that I have like dog-eared that like maybe I can go back through, but I don't think I'll ever give this book a reread. It was medium. I don't know. I certainly wasn't mad about reading it or anything like this. But as far as discussion goes, has anyone read a book like this? In terms of like my experience, where you've read a book, but there's like another book that's just like a little bit better, and it's not that you like think that the book that you read was bad. It's just you just can't really enjoy it as much as maybe it ought to be enjoyed because you've read this other book that has a lot of similarities or a lot of overlap. If you have something like this, feel free to put it in the comments. Do the YouTube algorithm stuff, like, comment, share, subscribe, and have a good day.